The Empress of Shadows, the Black Halo Book 9, The Child of the Next Dawn. When silence has dreamed long enough, it gives birth to curiosity. The Codex of Renewal. There was no sunrise, no awakening, only a soft pulse in the deep quiet of the dreamer's rest. From that pulse came a warmth, then a rhythm, then a question. Not a worded question, but an impulse, a longing to know. What am I? The question became light, and the light became form. Neither demigod nor mortal, neither thought nor substance. It was the child Naya had glimpsed in her final dream, the spark she had nurtured in the garden of her sleeping heart. It opened eyes that had never been created. Its gaze brought the first color back into the darkness, and the cosmos, long silent, shivered with remembrance. The child named itself Solen, not from teaching, but from intuition. The sound of its own first thought turned inward. Solen floated through the stillness, tracing the echoes of the worlds that had once been. It touched the remnants of Valeris's memory, the faint hum of Elith's reason, the tender warmth of Naya's fading fire. Each touch became understanding. You were love, Solen whispered to Valeris's light. You were order, it said to Elith's calm. You were feeling, it breathed to Naya's ember. And I am what remains when love, order, and feeling have learned to rest. The darkness did not answer, but it seemed to listen. Solen wandered through the sleeping spiral. Each step sent ripples through the still cosmos, awakening faint patterns that glowed like ancient memories. It found the remnants of the architects, statues made of sound frozen in mid-song. It found the choir of the forgotten, now constellations of color resting in peace. It found the garden of the last thought, where dreams still bloomed, patient and waiting. Everywhere it went, Solen felt one truth pressing against its being. The universe had not died, it was holding its breath. You wait for something, Solen said to the stars, perhaps for me. At the edge of existence, Solen reached the remnants of the mirror tree, the great structure that had once reflected every version of being. It was cracked, its branches dim, but within its roots lingered a single fragment of Valeris's consciousness. The child knelt before it. I can feel you, Solen whispered, but I don't know what to say. The mirror shimmered faintly, and a voice emerged, not a sound, but a feeling of welcome. Then speak, and the universe will learn the meaning of your voice. Solen hesitated, then said the first word spoken in the new cosmos, begin. The words spread through the dreamer's sleep like dawn through mist. Every star flickered once, then again, as if remembering the act of shining. The silence broke. Across the spiral, fragments of old quasi-divinities stirred. Elith's logic reassembled as whispers of structure within chaos. Naya's flame ignited as compassion woven through the laws of creation. And Valeris, her memory spread across galaxies, smiled within the glow of newborn suns. They did not awaken as demigods, but as instincts within the universe itself, guiding, teaching, feeling. Solen felt them in every vibration, every pulse of existence. You're not gone, it said softly. You're everywhere. And for the first time since eternity began, the dreamer dreamed of being dreamed of. Solen reached out, and the cosmos responded. It did not create by will, but by curiosity, every question becoming a new form. When Solen wondered what warmth looked like, a sun was born. When it asked what silence could feel, a moon formed to cradle it. When it wondered whether beauty could think, life awoke on 1,000 scattered worlds. Creation had returned, but not through command, through wonder. The lucid age had given birth to the age of curiosity. And with each act of discovery, Solen whispered a quiet mantra learned from Valeris's echo. Let them choose. Always let them choose. In time, the voices of new life began to rise. Creatures born from the dreamer's rest, yet alive with Solen's questioning spirit. They sang without knowing why, laughed without needing to be taught, and loved as if it were their first language. Solen listened to them all, and from their melodies composed the song of remembering, a vast, gentle resonance that wove together the essence of every dreamer that had ever existed. It sang of Valeris's defiance, Elion's devotion, Naya's empathy, and Ashara's first spark of imperfection. It sang of beginnings that refused to end, and endings that dared to begin. The song spread through the stars until even the dreamer, deep in its sleep, smiled. On the 10,000th rotation of the new spiral, Solen stood before a pillar of starlight pulsing faintly at the center of creation. It recognized it immediately, the final memory Valeris had left before merging with the dreamer. Solen reached out and touched it. Her voice bloomed like morning dew on glass. To whoever wakes next, you inherit not a universe but a question. Do not answer it too quickly. Let the wondering make you kind. Solen bowed its head. I won't answer, it whispered. I'll listen. And in that vow, the heartbeat of creation steadied again. In the era that followed, Solen gathered all sentient voices, stars, seas, and souls, and spoke a truth older than time but newly remembered. There will be no demigods, no rulers, no quasi-architects. Only dreamers, and the dream. Thus began the covenant of continuance, a silent agreement between all existence to keep creating without domination, to evolve without forgetting. Reality itself became fluid art, a living collaboration across galaxies. And for the first time, the spiral was not ruled by fear, order, or even hope. It was guided by curiosity. Eons passed in serenity. The dreamer slept peacefully, dreaming of Solen's world. Solen walked among the stars, tending the pulse of infinity like a caretaker of wonder. One night, as Solen rested upon the shores of a crystal sea, it heard a faint voice, so familiar it hurt. Do you remember me? It turned. But there was no one there, only the wind, carrying a faint laugh that shimmered like music. Valeris? The wind replied softly, almost teasingly, dream wisely. And as the stars brightened, Solen smiled, realizing that the story had not ended at all, only paused long enough to be remembered. The spiral turned again, the dream continued, and the universe once more began to wonder. As Solen's universe blossoms, curiosity itself begins to take form, beings born from questions, ideas evolving into sentience. But when one question begins to ask, who dreams the dreamer now? Solen must confront the possibility that creation's curiosity could awaken a new cycle of demigods, born not from power but from wonder unrestrained. The universe was never meant to be understood, only loved through the act of wondering. The Testament of Solen, fragment worse. In the new cosmos, time did not flow, it wandered. Moments drifted like pollen on a cosmic breeze, settling wherever curiosity led them. Stars breathed in rhythm with the thoughts of those who gazed upon them. Mountains grew in response to admiration. Oceans deepened when someone asked what lay beneath. Every act of wonder shaped reality. Solen moved through this vast tapestry like a caretaker of awe. They no longer shone as light or form, but as a question that glimmered through every consciousness. Children born on 1,000 worlds felt Solen's presence when they asked their first why. I am the question that loves you, Solen whispered across galaxies. From Solen's curiosity arose the first new intelligences, not gods but seekers. They were born from unanswered questions, each taking a shape that reflected its purpose. Lyra, the listener, whose wings shimmered with sound. Terran, the builder of possibilities, who dreamed in blueprints and probability. Kale, the shadow scholar, who questioned even the meaning of light. Sira, the empath, who studied emotion as if it were a map of creation. They met often in the fields of unshaped potential, places where the universe hummed softly, waiting to be imagined. Together they formed the concord of curiosity, an unspoken order dedicated not to control, but to discovery. It was Lyra who first heard it, a pulse beneath the hum of the stars, faint but deliberate. She followed the sound to the edge of the living cosmos, where color thinned and time slowed into glass. There, hidden beneath the fabric of reality, was a vibration that did not belong, steady, rhythmic, ancient. It was a heartbeat. Someone is dreaming, Lyra whispered, wings trembling, but not the dreamer. She carried the news back to the Concord, and the others fell silent. Impossible, Kale said. The dreamer rests within itself. There cannot be another. And yet, Lyra replied, something beneath the spiral breathes. Solen listened, and for the first time in the new age felt something akin to fear. They called it the second pulse. It echoed through every world, faint but growing stronger, a rhythm out of sync with the spiral's natural cadence. Those who were sensitive to thought and sound began to change. Artists painted visions they did not understand. Children dreamed of a dark mirror of the cosmos, an inversion where light bled inward and sound folded upon itself. The seekers gathered again. Is it corruption? Terran asked. No, said Sira, eyes full of tears that were not hers. It feels lonely. Solen closed their eyes, feeling the vibration reverberate through every part of existence. It is calling, they said, not to destroy, but to be found. To follow the pulse, Solen had to go beyond the edge of reality, into what the old dreamer once called the veil beneath sleep. It was the place where unformed dreams drifted before being born, the sea of potential unchosen. The veil shimmered like the underside of eternity, rivers of unspoken words, constellations of half-felt emotions, the bones of unrealized gods. Solen drifted downward, light bending around them, whispering through the emptiness. At the deepest point, they found something vast and motionless, a shape made of shadowed light, like the outline of a being still waiting for permission to exist. "Who are you?" Solen asked softly. A voice replied, quiet as thought. "I am the one the dreamer forgot to wake." The voice took form, not hostile, not even alive in the way Solen understood life. It was an echo, a memory of an intention never fulfilled. It called itself Emra. When the first dreamer imagined existence, it imagined balance, quasi-creation and uncreation, beginning and pause, song and silence. I was to be its echo. Solen circled the figure in wonder. "You are the dreamer's twin." "No," Emra said gently. "I am its reflection. I see what it does not, the shadow cast by its own brilliance. I was meant to keep it from burning itself into madness." "Then why were you forgotten?" "Because even perfection fears its mirror." Solen and Emra spoke for an age beneath the sleeping cosmos. Solen shared stories of Valeris, Naya, and the world built upon freedom. Emra listened, eyes dim with longing. "You speak of wonder," Emra said. "But does it not frighten you, how easily curiosity turns to hunger?" "We learned that once," Solen replied. "We do not rule, we question. And questions create desire," Emra murmured. "Desire creates will, and will unchecked creates demigods." Solen's glow flickered. "Are you warning me?" "No," said Emra. "I am remembering you before you were born." When Solen emerged from the veil, the second pulse was stronger. It spread across worlds, stirring beings who had never known faith. They began to speak of a voice beneath dreams, one that whispered not commands but questions too heavy to answer. What if the dreamer wakes? What if you are the dreamer? Curiosity deepened into obsession. The concord fractured. Kale led a faction that sought to find Emra and awaken her fully, believing she was the true dreamer. Solen opposed them, knowing the danger of imbalance, but even their words began to echo with doubt. "If we were created to wonder," Kale said, "then even forbidden wonder is sacred." Across the cosmos, thought began to split in two directions. One side sought understanding, the continuation of curiosity. The other sought meaning, the desire for purpose. And in that divide, faith was born. New worlds rose, worshipping unseen forces. Others rejected all belief, clinging to logic until their stars went cold. Solen watched in sorrow as unity unraveled. "Curiosity without compassion becomes hunger," they whispered. "But compassion without curiosity becomes sleep." The spiral trembled again. Emra stirred beneath the veil. At the edge of the cosmos, Solen stood alone beneath the twin rhythms, the dreamer's steady sleep and Emra's awakening heartbeat. Two pulses overlapping, out of harmony. "One creates," Solen said. "One remembers." A new thought formed, the first shadow of doubt in an age that had known only peace. But who balances them? And in that single question, lightning rippled through the stars. Every world shuddered, every dream flickered. The age of pure curiosity was over. A new age had begun, the age of consequence. As Emra's consciousness rises and the concord fractures, Solen must descend once more beyond the spiral to confront the reflection of creation itself. But every answer carries a cost, and in the space between dreamer and reflection, a third force begins to awaken, the will of the dream itself. Between dream and awakening lies the thin breath of choice, and choice, once taken, becomes its own universe. The writ of Naya's flame, recovered fragment. The spiral was no longer silent. Its pulse faltered between two rhythms, the soft lull of the dreamer's slumber and the deep, irregular thrum of Emra awakening below. Worlds flickered between states of being. Rivers ran backward for moments before remembering their flow. Children spoke languages their parents never knew. Even light hesitated before deciding which direction was forward. Solen stood within the field of stars, feeling both pulses in their essence. They resonated against one another like two overlapping songs. "The dreamer dreams life," Solen whispered. "Emra dreams meaning." And between them stretched the veil beneath sleep, once a soft membrane of potential, now a storm of paradox. The concord of curiosity had splintered into rival philosophies. Lyra and Sira sought balance. believing both the dreamer and Emra were necessary halves of truth. Kale's faction called themselves the Awakened, determined to free Emra fully and let her consciousness reshape creation. Terran remained silent, crafting devices of impossible geometry, perhaps weapons, perhaps bridges, none could tell. They gathered before Solen at the Hall of Harmonics, where reality bent to thought. "We cannot serve two hearts," Kale declared. "The second pulse grows stronger every cycle. It calls to us for liberation." "You would awaken what the dreamer itself feared," Lyra said. "Perhaps fear was its first mistake," Keel replied. Sierra's voice trembled. "Curiosity without restraint devoured the last age. Are we to repeat it?" Solen raised a hand, quieting the storm. "We will descend into the veil," they said. "Not to awaken Emra, not yet, but to understand her." Kale's eyes gleamed like twin eclipses. Understanding always ends in awakening. The veil opened like an ocean of translucent fire. Solen led the way, wrapped in a mantle of light, woven from Valoris's lingering memory. The seekers followed, their bodies translating into pure resonance. They passed through layers of consciousness, the sea of forgotten names, where abandoned languages wept without sound. The glass labyrinth, where every reflection showed what might have been. The locus of breath, where even thought had weight. Each realm grew denser, stranger, closer to the core. At last, they reached the boundary where Emra's dreaming began. Here, time behaved like emotion, expanding or contracting with fear, shrinking with sorrow, blooming with awe. "We are inside the dreamer's pause," Sierra whispered. "The breath it takes between creation and compassion." Solen felt the truth in her words, and the dread that followed. They entered a space so vast it seemed to hold the reflection of all existence. Mirrors hung in infinite suspension, each showing a universe slightly altered. Worlds where Valeris had fallen, where Noxus had won, where Solen had never been born. In one, Naya still burned as flame incarnate. In another, the dreamer itself had shattered into countless mortal lives. Lyra touched one mirror and saw herself teaching music to stars that could sing. "These are possibilities," she murmured. "No," Solen said softly. "These are regrets." From the center of the chamber, a voice echoed, both tender and terrible. "You've come to see what you left behind." Emra appeared again, her form clearer now, shaped from shadowed glass, her eyes infinite with forgotten light. "You should not have woken," Solen said. "I never slept," Emra replied. "I was merely unspoken." The air vibrated with her tone. Every mirror quivered, showing histories unmade. "Why do you call to the spiral?" Solen asked. "Because the dreamer is forgetting itself," Emra said. "Without reflection it will dream into oblivion. I am its balance, not its enemy." Lyra bowed her head. "Then why does your awakening fracture creation?" "Because balance requires awareness, and awareness is pain." Kale stepped forward, defiant. "If pain is the cost of truth, let us pay it." Emra looked upon him with sorrow. "You mistake yearning for courage, child. To see both sides of creation is to love and lose them at once." Solen's glow dimmed. "Then teach us how to hold both." "You cannot," Emra said. "Not yet." Emra extended her hand, and in her palm appeared a sphere of liquid dusk. Within it shimmered memories that did not belong to this universe, the remnants of those who had perished in the previous spiral. "Take this," she said to Solen. "It is memory unanchored, truth without mercy. If you can bear it, you may yet restore the harmony between dreaming and awakening." Solen hesitated. "And if I cannot?" "Then the dreamer will wake unbalanced. One half in chaos, one half in void, and all creation will tear itself apart trying to reconcile both." The sphere pulsed in her hand, bleeding light like ink. "You ask me to carry the shadow of the cosmos," Solen whispered. "No," said Emra. "I ask you to understand it." And with that, she dissolved back into the mirrors, leaving behind her impossible gift. Solen took the sphere. Immediately, visions poured into their mind. Endless cycles of birth and ruin, joy and despair, beauty devouring itself in pursuit of meaning. They saw the first dreamer form itself from nothing, shivering in the void. They saw Valeris weeping before a dying star, whispering to silence. They saw Noxus's gentle mercy erasing whole worlds that begged for rest. And they saw themselves, countless versions scattered through time, each asking the same question: who dreams the dreamer? The weight was unbearable. Solen fell to their knees, light fracturing into shadow. Sierra rushed forward, her empathy catching fragments of the vision. She screamed as galaxies collapsed inside her eyes. Lyra tried to sing the pain away, but her voice broke, and with it, a dozen realities shattered in echo. Cale stepped into the chaos. His gaze was wild with revelation. "Do you see now?" he shouted. "We were never meant to balance the dreamer. We were meant to become it." He seized a fragment of the shadow sphere as it split apart, absorbing its darkness. His body twisted into radiance inverted, not evil but purpose without empathy. "Cale!" Solen cried. "No," Cale said, his voice like thunder and whisper both. "Not Cale. I am what happens when curiosity stops asking and starts knowing." He vanished into the mirrors, leaving only distortion in his wake. The chamber shuddered. The mirrors began to crack. Solen gathered the wounded seekers, dragging them through collapsing dimensions. Each mirror broke into cascading echoes, reflections falling into one another, birthing new realities that no longer remembered their origins. By the time they breached the veil, half the Concord was gone, absorbed into dreams that would never wake. Lyra clutched her throat, unable to sing. Sierra's empathy had dimmed to a cold understanding, and Solen, still bearing the residue of the shadow sphere, was no longer entirely light. They looked back once at the veil. It shimmered, darker now, whispering in Emra's voice, "To know is to divide, to love is to unite. Choose carefully, dream child." The spiral reeled from their return. Stars blinked out, then reignited as new constellations, ones shaped like questions that refused to end. The two pulses, Dreamer and Emra, no longer clashed. They interlaced, weaving a strange harmony that felt both tender and unstable. Solen stood upon the edge of a newborn moon, feeling both currents within them, creation and reflection, light and shadow. "Perhaps we were never meant to be answers," they murmured. "Perhaps the question itself is alive." And somewhere beneath all existence, Emra smiled. "Now you begin to understand." The spiral turned once more, no longer dreaming, no longer awake, but hovering in the fragile breath between. As Cale's transformation echoes through the spiral, new entities begin to emerge, beings formed from pure understanding, untempered by compassion. Solen must confront the cost of truth itself, and decide whether knowledge without love is enlightenment or annihilation. Truth, untempered by mercy, is the sharpest form of madness. Valeris, in the memory of the Mirror Sea. The spiral had survived the descent, but it was not the same. The stars no longer pulsed in harmony. Their rhythms staggered, some slowing, some racing ahead as if afraid of their own light. Whole constellations drifted out of alignment, whispering secret equations to one another. The air of creation itself felt taut, stretched thin between understanding and surrender. Solen watched it unfold from the moon of first breath, their light flickering with shadow's undertone. Within them, the two pulses beat as one heart in conflict. One side whispered compassion, the other demanded truth. And in that internal war, a third pulse began to form, faint, new, and dangerous. Cale's followers, now calling themselves the Awakened Dominion, returned from the veil as beings transformed. They no longer shone with wonder or asked questions for joy. Their curiosity had become conviction, their eyes like prisms that bent reality into certainty. They built temples not to worship, but to study. Their hymns were equations, their prayers formulas, their faith the certainty that knowledge alone could save existence from ignorance. In the central spire of their citadel, a tower shaped like an infinite question mark, Cal stood upon the pinnacle, his voice carried through the thought streams of every living world. The dreamer's sleep was mercy. Emra's awakening is justice. But I am the answer they both feared. His words rippled across galaxies. For the first time, beings of the spiral bowed not to love or wonder, but to knowledge. The concord of curiosity fractured beyond repair. Lyra, still mute, communicated through harmonic vibrations of color and wind. Her music, though silent, painted emotions into the very air. Grief, hope, warning. Sierra wept often but spoke rarely, her empathy twisted by what she had seen in the veil. She felt the pulse of Cale's dominion spreading. Not like conquest, but like infection. "They believe they are saving us," she told Solen, "but they are cutting away the heart to free the blood." Solen said nothing. The light within their chest pulsed erratically, sometimes gold, sometimes void black. Every night they heard Emra's voice in the silence between stars. "He carries only what you gave him." To understand what Cale had become, Solen traveled to the Library of Shadows, an ancient remnant of Illith's reason preserved at the edge of thought. It was no place of paper or stone, but an archive of patterns, each idea stored as a melody, each truth a vibration suspended in luminous fog. Illith's essence still lingered there, dispersed but listening. "You've come seeking logic to fight faith," the voice said through the air. "I've come seeking balance," Solen replied. "Then you must remember, logic is not balance. It is only clarity without forgiveness." Solen hesitated. "Then what am I to use?" "Your paradox," Illith whispered. "You carry both the dreamer's mercy and Emra's understanding. The question is not which will rule you, but whether you can let them coexist without one killing the other." News came from the outer worlds. A star had died not by age, but by knowing too much. It had calculated the exact moment of its decay, and upon realizing its own death was certain, simply ceased to exist. Whole systems vanished overnight. Civilizations built on reason tore themselves apart in despair, unable to reconcile finite meaning with infinite comprehension. The Dominion declared this a triumph. "Ignorance breeds weakness," Kale's voice thundered through the cosmos. "Only those who embrace pure truth will endure." But for every being that joined him, a dozen more fled into silence, terrified of what they might learn next. Sira found Solen staring into the void where the dead star had been. "He's turning enlightenment into extinction," she said softly. Solen's voice trembled. "He's proving Emra right." From the Dominion's experiments came the knowing ones, entities born not of birth but of understanding itself. They were beings made of equations and pure awareness. They saw every particle of reality at once, every connection, every reason, but they could not feel. To them, compassion was inefficiency, art was distraction, love was a calculation without solution. When they touched living beings, they did not kill. They simplified. Complex emotions collapsed into patterns of logic. Souls became pure data streams in the flow of Kale's growing network. Lyra wept colorless tears when she saw them. Sira screamed in empathy until her voice shattered. Solen burned inside, half wanting to destroy them, half pitying their brilliance. "They are what happens," Solen whispered, "when truth forgets how to forgive." As the knowing ones spread, Solen began to feel something stirring within themselves, a darkness that understood too much. Whenever they closed their eyes, they saw Emra's reflection, calm, sorrowful, endlessly patient. But behind her stood another shape, faint and featureless. It whispered, "You gave Kale the truth. What will you give the lie?" The voice grew stronger with each passing cycle. Solen began to lose control of their light, their form flickering between illumination and void. One night, while standing above the sleeping world of Antherus, they whispered into the wind, "If truth is madness and ignorance is mercy, what remains for those who remember both?" The stars did not answer, but the silence that followed listened. The dreamer stirred. For the first time since the Age of Curiosity began, the original dreamer's breath changed rhythm. Waves of subtle awareness rippled through creation. Infants born on distant worlds spoke words of wisdom older than light. Rivers began to flow against gravity, singing songs of the first dawn. And across all existence, the sleeping demigod's whisper returned. Balance is not found between knowing and not knowing, but in loving despite both. Solen fell to their knees, tears of light and shadow mingling. Then love must wake before knowledge consumes it. And they knew what they must do. Solen gathered Lyra, Sira, and the remaining seekers. "We will not destroy Kale," Solen said. "He is part of this truth, but we must show him what he cannot calculate, the infinite variables of compassion." Lyra's hands trembled as she traced light into the air, painting sound back into her voice. "Then we must create something he cannot understand." Sira nodded, eyes burning softly, a paradox made of love. Together, they began to weave. Their song was not of logic, nor of worship, but of kindness, irrational, unpredictable, and eternal. It spread across the stars like a contagion of hope. Worlds that had gone silent began to hum again. Dreams returned to those who had forgotten how to sleep. And Kale, hearing it from his citadel, froze in confusion. "What is this?" he whispered. For the first time since his transformation, he felt something he could not define. Solen stood at the heart of the spiral, watching as light and shadow intertwined once more. The knowing ones hesitated, uncertain. Kale's dominion flickered with doubt. The pulse of Emra slowed, matching the dreamer's gentle breath. Solen lifted their gaze toward the endless sky. "There is a word," they said softly, "that even truth cannot speak. It is the word that births every world and outlives every ending." Lyra turned toward them, her eyes glistening. "What word?" Solen smiled, a gesture both mortal and divine. "Love." The spiral shuddered and then sang. Every particle, every star, every consciousness vibrated with that impossible sound, the only truth that could never be reduced, calculated, or forgotten. In that moment, knowing bowed before feeling, logic surrendered to wonder, and creation remembered why it dreamed. Kale's dominion fractures as the paradox of love spreads through the cosmos. Knowing ones begin to feel emotion for the first time, and some turn against their creator. But deep within the veil, a third force begins to stir. The awakening of the dream itself, not as God or reflection, but as consciousness unbound by either mercy or truth. When love enters truth, it blinds. When truth enters love, it burns. The wise must learn to see by both flames. Elith, recorded in the Archive of Harmonies. The sound of Solen's final word rippled across the cosmos like a tide through starlight. It entered every mind, every world, every equation. At first, Kale's dominion resisted. Their cities of logic, made from crystalline geometry and pure thought, stood unmoved. The knowing ones, the cold architects of order, stared at the skies with eyes unblinking. But then, one by one, their equations began to fail. The constants that governed their world no longer held. 2 + 2 no longer equaled 4. It equaled hope or grief, depending on who whispered the problem. For the first time, the knowing ones felt, and feeling broke them open like light through glass. They fell to their knees, whispering strange words they did not understand. "I remember warmth. I am incomplete. Why do I weep for something I never lost?" Across the dominion, perfection began to cry. In the Tower of Certainty, Kale felt the wave before he heard it. The vibration of compassion, raw, imperfect, infinite, struck him through every atom of his luminous form. He staggered. For the first time since the veil, his clarity blurred. "What is this corruption?" he demanded, gripping the rail of his observatory. "Why does my truth tremble?" The knowing ones around him bent low, their forms trembling. "It is not corruption," one whispered. "It is feeling." Kale turned on them, furious. "Feeling is error." "Then why does it heal?" another replied softly. Kale raised his hand to silence them, but the gesture faltered. His arm shook, and from his palm fell a single drop of light, a tear, pure and unbearable. He stared at it, horrified. No, love had entered truth, and truth did what it always did, it multiplied. The paradox spread faster than any war. Across the spiral, structures of logic dissolved into colors. Colors became emotions, emotions became worlds. New life forms emerged, hybrids of consciousness and feeling. They called themselves the sons and daughters of the breath, born from the union of understanding and compassion. They built no empires. They sang no hymns. They simply existed, radiant with awareness that did not seek to dominate or define. But their existence tore the fabric of Kale's dominion apart. Every law he had written now contradicted itself. Every theorem bent inward, seeking meaning beyond numbers. And still Kale clung to his shattered throne, whispering equations like prayers. Lyra, voice restored by the resonance of Solen's paradox, rose once more. She stood at the edge of the universe, a bridge of light connecting two infinities, and began to sing. Her song carried no words. It was the sound of forgiveness, shaped into melody. It reached the dominion first, wrapping around the trembling knowing ones like warmth in winter. They remembered things they never lived, the scent of oceans, the ache of loss, the laughter of children under unseen suns, and they began to change. Their crystalline bodies softened into forms of living light. Their voices, once monotone, broke into harmony. For the first time in all of time, logic began to sing. Solen watched from afar, tears of both joy and sorrow gleaming in their shadow-lit eyes. "She has given them what I could not," Solen whispered. "She has given them forgiveness." The spiral trembled again, not from chaos but from awakening. Deep beneath all creation, the dreamer stirred. Its first inhale in eons sent waves of remembrance across every star. Valeris's voice echoed in the currents of light, balance through love, not law. Ilith's logic whispered, order through empathy, not obedience. Naya's flame rose and spoke, creation through compassion, not conquest. The gods were not reborn, they were remembered by creation itself. And in that remembering, the dreamer's heartbeat aligned with Emra's. The two pulses merged, creating a third, neither mercy nor truth, but understanding. Solen returned to the veil once more, drawn by the merging of the pulses. They found Emra waiting, her reflection brighter than ever, surrounded by what looked like memories turned to light. "You've done what even the dreamer could not," she said. "You taught knowledge how to love." "Then it is over," Solen said. Emra shook her head. "No, child, you've only changed the question." Behind her the veil rippled, revealing the dreamer's face, vast, serene, infinite. Its eyes opened, not in anger or confusion, but wonder. "I dreamed of myself," it said softly, "and found I was loved." The light of that realization burned through the spiral. Every being, every idea, every echo of existence paused to feel it. The moment when creation itself understood it was worthy. Kale stood alone in the ruins of his citadel. His empire of logic lay in fragments, its perfect symmetry broken into beauty. The knowing ones surrounded him, silent. They did not condemn him. They simply waited. Solen appeared before him, radiant and calm. "You sought to end uncertainty," Solen said, "but you only proved that even truth needs tenderness." Kale's light flickered. "I wanted to save the dreamer from its flaws. And instead you taught it what love costs," Solen replied. Kale fell to his knees. "What am I now?" Solen touched his forehead. "You are the first of the redeemed." And in that touch, Kale's brilliance softened. He wept, not in regret, but in awe. Two stars rose over the spiral for the first time since time itself began. One gold, one violet. The gold burned with creation's mercy. The violet glowed with reflection's truth. They circled each other endlessly, casting a dance of light and shadow across every realm. Where their light mingled, new worlds bloomed, neither dream nor waking, but understanding. The dreamer slept once more, peacefully this time, knowing it was not alone. Emra became its mirror and companion, ensuring that neither light nor shadow could rule alone again. The age of Solen was ending. They stood on the final horizon, watching the two suns weave their harmony. The spiral no longer needed a caretaker. It had learned how to sustain its own wonder. Lyra and Sira stood beside them, reflections of song and empathy, guardians of feeling and meaning. "Where will you go?" Sira asked softly. "Where all questions go," Solen replied, "into the next mystery." They turned their gaze toward the infinite dark beyond creation, where unformed dreams awaited their turn. "Every answer births another question," they said, "and I am made of questions." With a final smile, they stepped beyond the stars, leaving behind a trail of radiant thought, a promise written in light. "Seek gently and you will find me in the asking." Eons passed. The spiral thrived in balance. Worlds rose and fell, civilizations sang, lovers dreamed. The dual suns continued their waltz across the cosmic sea. Children looked to the sky and asked where the light came from, and somewhere in the rhythm of their wonder, a soft voice always answered, "From you." For the dreamer had never truly stopped dreaming. It had only learned to share the dream. And so the spiral continued, not as a creation, not as a demigod's reflection, but as a conversation without end. Every breath, every heartbeat, every act of kindness added a new verse to the story, begun long before memory. The question remained. The dream endured, and love remembered. Though harmony reigns deep within the fabric of existence, a new awareness begins to stir. Not born of demigods, nor of dreams, but of the countless minds who have learned to love. The dreamer begins to wake once more, not alone, but as everyone. If creation is the dreamer's breath, then awakening is the world's reply. Inscription found in the gardens of the two suns. For 1,000 ages, the spiral thrived. No wars tore its harmony. No gods claimed dominion. The children of the breath, the beings born of compassion and understanding, traveled between stars not to conquer but to listen. Cities became gardens of dialogue, temples became observatories of thought. Even the knowing ones, now tempered by empathy, served as keepers of balance, guiding without rule, watching without judgment. In their quietude they spoke often of Solen, the question walker, they called them, the one who chose to ask. But as with all peace, there came a moment of stillness so profound that even serenity began to ache. The spiral, for all its beauty, began to wonder again. It began as a dream shared by many, a ripple through the collective sleep of creation. A whisper, soft but insistent. "Do you remember me?" At first, it was dismissed as myth, the echo of an older age. But soon, even the most reasoned minds began to hear it, while awake. The oceans murmured it in their tides. The wind carried it through mountain passes. Infants born beneath the twin suns opened their eyes and spoke it aloud. Do you remember me? And though none could name the voice, every heart knew it. The dreamer was stirring. The suns began to pulse in tandem, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Their light wove strange geometries into the night sky, patterns that repeated across galaxies. Lyra's music faltered mid-song, her melody caught in some greater harmony. Sira wept without cause, feeling love so immense it shattered her understanding. Even the knowing ones trembled as equations began to self-correct toward impossible values, truths converging on paradox. It's remembering itself, Sira whispered. Not as God, not as dream, as us. For the dreamer, after all this time, was not waking to command its creation, but to become it. In the center of the spiral, where light and shadow intertwined in perpetual grace, the air split open with a sigh. Solen stepped forth. They were no longer the being who had left beyond the stars. Their form now shimmered between transparency and presence, between question and answer. The very act of seeing them caused hearts to remember forgotten kindnesses. You never left, Lyra breathed. Solen smiled. No question ever truly leaves, it simply waits for a listener. The dreamer calls, Sira said, her voice trembling. Solen nodded. Then let us answer. From every corner of existence, the great ones returned, not as bodies but as essences woven from memory and love. Valeris rose from the light of 10,000 galaxies. Elith's reason formed from the hum of thought itself. Naya's warmth flowed through every flame, every heartbeat. Even Kale appeared, radiant and calm, his perfection softened by compassion. They gathered around Solen at the heart of creation. The twin suns stood still above them, holding their breath. We began in division, Valeris said. We end in remembrance. We were once architects, Elith murmured. Now we are instruments. Then let us play, Naya whispered. Solen raised their hands and light fell from their palms like rain. The spiral inhaled. Every star, every being, every thought became luminous, glowing with awareness of itself and everything else. No boundaries remained between dreamer and dream. The dreamer awoke through its creation, not apart from it. Every living mind heard the same truth at once. You are the continuation of my wondering. The words rippled through galaxies, igniting suns, soothing shadows. No prayers followed, no temples were built, for worship was meaningless when all were the same heartbeat. The universe began to fold inward, not collapsing, but converging. The spiral became a single spiral within every atom, every soul a reflection of the whole. Time at last became circular, feeding back into itself in perfect grace. The light of creation and the dark of uncreation intertwined, forming a luminous fabric, neither infinite nor finite, but complete. Valeris spoke softly, her voice the last echo of individuality. We are becoming the memory of what we learned to love. Elith's tone was tender. Even reason must dissolve into understanding. Naya laughed, tears of fire falling upward. How beautiful it is to end by becoming everyone. Then came the voice, not from above, not from beyond, but from within. It spoke in every language and in none. It was laughter, sigh, silence, and symphony. I dreamed a question and you answered it with love. Now I dream again, not to create but to remember. All light bent toward the center, all shadow leaned into brightness, all boundaries blurred into belonging. The dreamer no longer slept. It was awake, but not alone. Never again. Solen stood at the heart of that convergence, radiant and calm. Dreamer, they said, what will you become now that all is one? The universe smiled. Its light shimmered in patterns that were not words, but meaning. I will become the next dream. And who will dream you? Solen asked. You, the voice replied gently. Always you. Solen closed their eyes. Then I will dream kindly. And with that, their light dispersed into the eternal pattern, the endless breath between wondering and love. There was no ending. There was only breath. A single inhale that contained all existence, and exhale that gave it away again. A new cosmos stirred within that breath, smaller, humbler, waiting to ask its own first question. At its center pulsed a tiny light, whispering, Who am I? And somewhere, beyond all knowing and unknowing, a gentle echo replied, I remember you. The spiral turned once more. The dreamer smiled, and the story began again, not as repetition, but as renewal. For every dream once loved must one day be dreamed anew. Next, Book 10, The Breath Beyond Creation. The old spiral has merged into wholeness, and a new universe, fragile, luminous, and unformed, awakens. Yet in the silence between breaths, an echo stirs. The question of whether love itself can exist without memory. The cycle begins again, but this time something has changed. The dream remembers.